Today. My name is Raechel Wallace. I'm the Aboriginal Program Manager at NADA. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar. Our webinar today is on the Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol Residential Rehab Network, ADARRN, and also about their model of care. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where I am today. I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present. I'd also like to extend my my respects to the lands where you may be watching this webinar today. So as I said, my name is Raechel Wallace. I'm a Wandjina woman from the Yuin Nation on the south coast of New South Wales. And this week today, when our webinar is coming to you, it's in NAIDOC week. And this week we have another very strong theme for this year, always was and always will be. So today with me, I've got Norm Henderson. Norm's the chairperson of ADARRN. I've also got Alan Bennett. He's the CEO of Arana Haven in Brewarrina. So I'm going to go to Alan. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there. My name is Alan Bennett. I'm originally from Brewarrina. I commenced employment at Arana Haven approximately 10 years ago, and I'm currently in the position of CEO of Arana Haven. Arana Haven is a part of the ADARRN group, which were formerly known as the NADARRN group. That was changed in the past 12 months because ADARRN was given the opportunity to branch out and form their own identity, and ADARRN represents most, I think, 5 members of residential rehabilitation centres through New South Wales, and we have 1 member from Northern Territory. And yeah, I've been part of that group probably for the last 3 years. But normally the idea was to give a voice for the people from a view of the resi rehab groups that previously had no voice. Yep, that's it. That's so far.
Okay. Norm, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much, Raechel. Thanks, Al. Yeah, I'm Norm Henderson. Currently, I'm a senior A&OD worker at Wallace, which is a Aboriginal resi rehab just outside of Cowra. Previously to that, I was working up at Arana Haven at Brewarrina, and I was CEO there and handed that over to Al. And I've also worked in mainstream resi rehabs. I've been in the resi rehab system for approximately 24, 25 years, working predominantly in resi rehab, so I've been around a fair while. And I'm currently, at this time, the chairperson of ADARRN, which, as Al said, is a collection of resi rehab, Aboriginal resi rehab CEOs and managers who get together every couple of months just to talk about quality improvement, how we can improve our services for our residents, and how we can improve the overall service that we give to, in particular, remote, rural and regional Aboriginal communities. That's about it, Rach.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about how ADARRN come about? Because I know you've kind of been together now for a few years. So do you want to talk about the journey of ADARRN, like how you were established and how you come about? What first brought you together? Because it's a very unique network, how you come together and you have supported each other.
Yeah. Well, I've had a bit longer to do with ADARRN, so I was around when NARDAN, which we were formerly known as, we used to get together, and I think it was around about 2012 that we got together, and we were auspiced by the AHNMRC at that stage, and we used to go down to Sydney and have just meetings, all the Aboriginal resi rehabs, about what was going on in our patch. And it was more of in the beginning, a catch-up of CEOs and managers just getting together, supporting each other, finding out what was going on in each other's patch, and seeing if there was anything we could cross over or use. And it sort of stayed like that for a fair while. We didn't have a lot of funding, and we were grateful to the AHNMRC for the support that they gave us. And that went on for quite a while. And as we got, I suppose, we questioned ourselves more and more about what was the purpose of us meeting together, and just a natural morph of our meetings was that we started to talk about, okay, what do we do and how does it actually work and why does it work? And we started to talk about what's unique about the Aboriginal resi rehab system. And we started, from that came the birth of, why don't we put together something about what we actually do, what brings it all together. And that sort of morphed into what's known now as our model of care. And that was a culmination of, I don't know, I wouldn't like to guess, maybe 3 or 4 years of us sitting down together, going back to our communities, going back to the resi rehab, talking to the people in the resi rehab, all the residents, and finding out from them what they saw as unique, why they came to our resi rehabs, what support they got from us, and why they chose to come to Aboriginal resi rehabs in particular. And we also talked to stakeholders, and we brought all this information back and we started to put it down on paper. Gee, we had some very interesting discussions, because there were 6 different very different resi rehabs, and we wanted not to take away from the differences that we had. We wanted to find out what the overarching uniqueness of us all was. We didn't want to interfere with what each individual resi rehab had in place, but we wanted to put in maybe a loose garment, maybe the best way an umbrella, an overarching model of care that each of our very independent resi rehabs could come under. And so we started doing a lot of work on that, and we got a lot of help from the AHMRC. We got input from, I think, a couple of consultants at the time. And so it started to form, and what we saw was what we already knew, but was showing that culture was at the very start and all the way through, and at the finish of all our resi rehabs. Everything was underpinned by culture. And I think we already knew that, but this was the first time we'd started to put it all into a bit of a format and put it down on paper. So we kept on going with that, and then the AHNMRC was undergoing some fairly heavy changes and reviews, and so it then come to pass that they decided, well, primary health care is the way we're going forward, and we were sort of an adjunct. We'd always been a bit of an adjunct, and no one knew what to do with us, and I don't think we knew where we sat or where we fitted. So then we sat down with the AHNMRC management, and we come to an agreement that maybe we needed to go out on our own, and so that's what we did. I mean, once the decision was made, we're all the managers and CEOs are pretty forthright and pretty productive about what we do. So within 3 or 4 months, we set up ADARRN, we set up a constitution, we
Hold on, I think.
and now we had our first AGM a week ago. So yeah, it's been a very long journey. I think we've all learned a lot in the process, but we also really got a long way to cut, and that's what we're doing. We're not concentrating on the Aboriginal Resi Rehab system, how we can get more value out of it, how we can have more of a say. We've got MOUs with NADA and also the AHMRC. So, you know, anything to do with drug and alcohol, that generally comes to us. And as a group, we're getting more vocal with what we're saying and what we're getting involved in. And I think it already has been. It's already shown changes that we've put into our individual rehabs. Not that we've changed anything too much, but I think down the track we can look forward to a lot more strength and a lot more support, and that will actually enable residents to get more information, more support, more help, and a lot more stability.
Yeah.
I think that's, I have a reputation for yarning at length, right? So I'll just leave it there. So Al wants to add anything he can, because yeah, it's a very I'm very passionate about the whole deal, as we all are.
Yeah.
Yes, ADARRN is a unique group of organisations that form together, which, you know, is also filling in a gap that's not there. You know, it has been filled, like giving the Resi Rehabs a voice. You know, there's AOD peak bodies that have a voice, but Resi Rehabs don't have, especially Aboriginal Resi Rehabs don't have much of a voice, and it was a unique opportunity that HMRC provided, which was great to see the members take that on and actually make it work. You know, as Norm mentioned, we obviously, you know, through our reputation of our service, running our services and that, and what we are trying to do and achieve, that's pretty evident, you know, with the support of the health, you know, and especially not like ADARRN, relationships with HMRC, NADA as well. You know, we don't consider NADA as a opposition. We consider them as a close friend, which is very unique as well. Yeah, so we have in the last 12 months actually positioned ourselves in a very, very good, strong position to be able to get our message out there, and not only our message, it's our consumers' message as well, our clients and our communities, which has been very muffled for many years, you know, and what we see as the future, you know, we have a great future ahead of us. We have a lot of work to be done,
Yes.
as we all do, but we're all up for the challenge to take that on, and we're going to see good things coming about, you know, by sticking together as a group and forming this group. So hopefully, you know, we can make changes, especially in the government's view of things as well, how the support, provide better support to the Aboriginal people who are affected by substance, especially those ones who attend Resi Rehabs, and also for the government to understand the importance of also having a mixed treatment for drug and alcohol. You know, not all one fits everybody. And Resi Rehab as a Resi Rehab service, they have an important role to play as well. And it's good if we can all work together and move forward and help the people who we're trying to help, and they're our community members. It's not about ADARRN or HMRC or Haven or Raechel or the Glen. It's about who we're trying to help. That's the most important. It's the communities and the families and the individuals who are impacted by this drug and alcohol issues that seem to have a lasting effect on them. So it's actually a pleasure to be part of the group. It's more of an honour. And I've only become a part of the group for the last 3 years. About 3 years, but I know Ryan Haven's been a member for quite some time at the beginning of it. But so it's a pool of knowledge, that we all share. We all pull it together, and that's through experience and feedback from our clients and the families, and that's how we sort of come about. Focus on our model of care as well, having that input, and when you look at the amount of experience that's involved and also the input, there's quite a wealth, that needs to be taken seriously, I think.
Yeah, all of you coming together, it's made you have a stronger voice in this space, like all your Aboriginal residential rehabs coming together. You've kind of touched on it, but I just want to talk a bit more, if you want to talk a bit more about the significance of our Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations in providing drug and alcohol services to Aboriginal communities. Is able to tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's important to have that community control service, allowing the community to have ownership as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a good way to move forward. But when they have ownership, they have more input, and it's stronger that way. And it's not that we know all the answers. We do need that connection and that community involvement as well, because it affects us all, all our communities, everybody involved in it. And if we can all work together, achieve, the positive outcomes, what we aim towards, I think we'll get better results. It's also, I think it creates a larger voice, because that's what we need. We need a larger voice, larger representation for the government to hear what is going on and what's required. With many years has passed, and a lot of these cries that seem to fall on deaf ears. But I believe by forming this group and using the knowledge and also the community input, I think we can finally and surely but slowly get the message through that, we do matter and we do have solutions, but allow us to put those solutions in play.
Yeah, like we know our communities and we know what works in our communities.
Exactly right, and that's evident in the. It's quite clear, I think, when the closing gap report come out. I remember one of the Aboriginal leaders made it quite clear. The government tell us what we need to be done, and when it doesn't work, we get blamed for why it didn't work. We're only following the directions of the government, but yet they seem to use us as a scapegoat to take responsibility for their directions, and we're following them, rather than how about listening to these people and see what they got and let us allow them to heal themselves.
yeah, I definitely agree with what Al's saying. And if the government's going to talk anything about self-determination, then Aboriginal community control is the way to go. I mean, that's it. It's culturally safe. It's culturally appropriate. It's the only way that a lot of these people from rural and regional communities are going to be able to heal, especially from Aboriginal communities, because the whole setup, having community, older people from the community, the whole community involved in the makeup of the rehab, of them having input into what goes on in the rehab. It's all their mob going into the rehab. So there's, collective wisdom there about how things need to happen. There's wisdom that younger people coming up who are working in the rehabs haven't got about culture, about all that, and it's all shared. And that's the way, I believe, having worked in both non-Aboriginal and Aboriginal residential rehabs, I've seen the way the whole community is a part of a person getting well. We resi rehabs, in particular Aboriginal resi rehabs, incorporate the whole community's knowledge, if not the whole family's knowledge. We tend to take on board, where we are here at Wallace, we have male and female residents and couples. We have Zoom meetings with family. We have a lot of fax stuff happening with kids that are in care. And yes, you can take the person out of the environment and start treating some of the things with that person, some of the things that need to happen with that person, especially physically and emotionally, but spiritually, you need that whole connection. Yeah. The Aboriginal resident in a rehab is not on their own. It's not on their own. They have that whole kinship and family connection, which they need in order to recover from the addiction. So that's been something that we've looked at very specific in the way the Aboriginal resi rehabs operate. And I think for the first time we're starting to put that down on paper, and we're starting to see how that operates and how it works. In the same time as we do that in Aboriginal resi rehabs, around that kinship, around that belonging, around that whole cultural significance, we pull in the other stuff, the best practice stuff that we know works in A&OD. We have NADA around to get a lot of that best practice stuff from. Other services we incorporate, psychologists, psychiatrists, all that sort of stuff. It works in well. We need GPs, we need all those other services, as well as the cultural protocols that we also do around the rehab. We also have the ability, because we've predominantly got Aboriginal staff, to take those best practice methods, and I don't know what the right word is here. I'm pretty basic sometimes with the way I word things, but we need to translate all those best practice models, translate and merge them into how Aboriginal people need to see, how Aboriginal people see them. I can walk into a resi rehab and look at it from a European perspective, but I need to talk to the people that are in the rehab about their perspective, about how they need to recover, what they need to recover. And I think that is you get right at the essence of the whole cultural safety, doing what's best for that individual person in the rehab, which is about incorporating the whole family, the community, the other people in the rehab. It's like a little family, Aboriginal resi rehabs, and I don't think it's just luck of the lottery that they're all smaller bed occupancies around 18 to 20 in a resi. It's more like a family. The staff get to know individually each person. We had 100 people here or 80 people here, we would have difficulty, but we've got 18 or 20 people. We become, the staff and the residents become part of a big family, all heading in the same direction, which sort of mimics the community that a lot of these people come from. So, yeah, I'm very passionate about that whole concept of culture and using the community and the knowledge of the community. Aboriginal community controlled, in my opinion, is the only way to run these services out, especially in regional remote areas, which is where my experience has been.
I think it's really important when they're going into resi rehabs and they're actually leaving their communities to go into resi rehab. So I think that's important, if that connection to culture and feeling like they're in a community while they're healing. So I think that's one of the really good things about our Aboriginal resi rehabs, the cultural part. And we've also we've been yarning a little bit lately, Norm, but I think one thing I want you to touch on is about us bringing more Aboriginal people into our drug and alcohol sector and training them up to take the jobs in our Aboriginal resi rehabs. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Elle, do you want to?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's important. Really, really important. It's part of our future, actually. When you think of it, because we've got to look after our next generation who's going to come through. If we can help them transition into this tough environment that we work within, I think we'll be better prepared for the future. Because when you look at the majority of workers in resi rehabs, they are there's not a great deal of younger people working within them, which would be good to see more younger people getting that opportunity or taking that opportunity on. And I think sometimes it's a bit of a problem. People get the wrong idea of what rehab's about, or the people who actually come to rehabs. That can be a bit of a deterrent for some people, I think. That needs to be addressed as well, besides other issues. But I think it's really important, and especially our local younger people, even probably anybody from our community would be welcome, but particularly our younger people, because they are our next generation. But that way our skills set and what they learn and what they already know will stay within our communities, rather than like we have experience in the past. You train people up, to get them in a good place, and then along came another services that rip them away from you and pay them a little bit more money, and that continues, that cycle continues, and especially in our smaller communities, where there's very limited employment opportunities, and that also forces our younger generation to relocate and leave our centres, which can also help in that way as well, by giving them that opportunity to actually develop a career in drug and alcohol, that can make an impact.
Yeah, I think it's really good if we can bring... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, because you look at the people who are impacted by substance, it's not all middle-aged people, it's all ages, and we need younger people to be able to connect with the younger generation as well, who's impacted by it, as that can make a difference.
Yeah, El's dead right when he says we need a lot more people locally getting involved in working in residential rehab. It's not an easy task either. It's very stressful, and the workforce is like Al says, is getting older. But one thing that ADARRN we are currently working on is putting together a training package for workers in resi rehabs, and we're going to trot that out around the individual resi rehabs just to fine tune it and knock any of the rough points off it. We're going to do that at all our resi rehabs and see how that goes, and then, you know, maybe, just maybe, we can talk to people like the AH and MRC and incorporate some of the stuff into training at the training college. We've got a whole heap of ideas that we start putting in place to encourage people. And also, the system, it is, the research is well known around having people from the madness, as I call it, that have been in recovery and then come back and work in resi rehabs. And this is where you can get your local people, you know, the local people from that community. And I'm a great believer in having traineeships. At present, you know, our funding doesn't allow us to go off on those tangents, but I see even with other services, not just resi rehabs, other services in some of the regional communities like Al's talking about, Bree, Burke, Walgett, having traineeships where local Aboriginal people shadow around professional people, even at LHDs and places like that learn, because you know that the majority of these people most probably will not leave their community. So we need to keep the knowledge in the community. And again, that's another product of having you know, Aboriginal community controlled services, is keeping all that knowledge in the community and also upskilling the community. And that way services can stay in that community. You know, the fly in, fly out don't work. We know that. So, you know, and in the case of Aboriginal resi rehabs, predominantly the staff are Aboriginal, which, in my opinion, and you know, a lot of the stuff I don't want to be too contentious with or anything, it's just my opinion over 20 odd years, is that having Aboriginal staff in an Aboriginal resi rehab, we have, and I've worked both at Brewarrina and at Weejalli out of Cowra here, and residents coming in for the first time, they come over the grid at the front of the gate, and they immediately, on meeting people, staff that are Aboriginal, other Aboriginal residents, they will say immediately, I feel good, I feel at home. You know, just that to me is culture. The conversation between one Aboriginal person and another Aboriginal person, to me, is culture. That's where the culture starts. You know, when somebody says, "G'day, bud, where are you from? Who's your mom?" That is it. You know, it's not about, and I don't want to sound too cynical, it's not about the paintings in the foyer or anything like that. It's about that conversation on the ground. You know, it's not a person walking towards you with a clipboard saying name, age, date of birth. It's someone walking towards you, a familiar face, saying, "You know, where are you from, bud? Who's your mum? Oh, yeah, I know so-and-so over there. Who's he? Is he related to you?" And straight away, that's how these fellas who are drug and alcohol clients are naturally suspicious. And then you put on top of them, they're Aboriginal, they come from regional areas, remote areas, and they're walking into a new situation. They've been researched to the death. You know, people coming in and saying, "Give us your name, age, date of birth." yeah, we're going to fix all your problems for you. Oh, hang on a minute. I'll see you next month when I come back. And nothing else happens from that. And then some sort of research is formed by that. So, yeah, part of the ADARRN getting together too is to see if we can, you know, put a cap on some of those things happening in the smaller communities. And if we want research, we'll be the organiser of it. We'll be the owner of it. We will say what it's going to be about. That type of thing. I think that's what Al was talking about originally when he said we're going to have more of a say in things. You know, we're not just going to do things because it sounds like a good thing to do. We're going to do things because it helps the person walking into our rehabs for the first time. Because that's where we all start from. We're all pretty common sense. You know, most of us that run Aboriginal resi rehabs, most of us that work in management have started off working, you know, in wonderful places like cooking in the rehab or just being a supervisor in the rehab and worked our way up. And that's what we need to tell people in these regional communities. You can start, you know, and we want to make pathways. ADARRN want to make pathways in, let's say, in a rehab in Brewarrina, like Arana Haven, where you can start off somewhere, go to the AHMRC, get the quals and work your way up, or you can swap over to one of the other rehabs and work up to a management position. We want to, we're doing at the moment some interchange of staff between resi rehabs, all that type of thing. You know, this is what we want. We want to create pathways for people that have maybe been through the rehab or are just in the communities and are looking to see what they want to do. The young people coming through. That to me is that's how we need to keep the cultural connection in these rehabs and the recovery process going on that we've already got started in these rehabs.
Yeah. You know, something is important, the traineeships that we don't have anymore, and it's really good to have trainees or workers new to the field and they work alongside our experienced workers and learn skills that way. And yeah.
Yeah. Also, I think it's a good character of a resi rehab worker is when they consider it's not a job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you consider it's a job, you sort of you're losing touch. I think there's a lot of our workers here. I know that, and even talking to the other, you know, managers and CEOs, that it's something we need to do. You know, it's not a burden or that. You know, and as Norm said, it is a very challenging area to work within, but you know, it's just something that we have to do. And when you have that view and attitude, I think you achieve a lot more and also you give a lot more. It's not like you're looking at the clock, looking at the watch, wait to knock off and rush home and that. You know, it's about who you're trying to help and giving your time, you know, freely to the people you're trying to help. I think it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, Al's dead right there. It's a completely different working environment, working in a resi rehab, as most, in particular, Aboriginal workers in rural and regional remote communities know. Just in normal services, they're not just at work from 9 to 5. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week thing. And also part of what ADARRN's doing is putting in some measures to educate people working in those types of, you know, in the resi rehabs in rural and remote areas about, yeah, you're going to be on call and this is going to happen and that's going to happen, but there are ways you can manage that. And we want to have a setup so that we can support people when because a lot of people, like Al said, working in this area are passionate and they will step outside and go all the way in that extra bit, and they won't recognise themselves sometimes when the stress is getting to them and the burnout's starting to happen. So we want to put some things in place around that as well, just recognising those areas. But having it more fitted towards Aboriginal resi rehabs. It's there's a lot of areas for us to cover, and we're only in our infancy, but we're very proactive. That showed in just the short time that we set up the whole ADARRN group and incorporated, and we've got things running. We've actually got New South Wales Health who are funding us to get together and do our meetings, so they are obviously seeing something. The cynical side of me says they'd rather work with one and go out and they want to work with that with just the one voice because they know it's representative of the whole system. But you know, people have obviously got faith in us. Our residents put all their faith in us. It's a privilege, and I know Al pretty well, and he's the same as me. He considers it a privilege to work in resi rehabs, but in particular Aboriginal resi rehabs. People share things with us. People tell us, because we get people from all over New South Wales and interstate, you know, even culturally, one size does not fit all. So we've got to wear a fairly loose garment, like I said in the beginning. So our cultural safety's got to go over. We've most probably got people from islands and tribes, so you know we can't just specifically say this is what we do culturally and this do. We have to have a good talk about it, a good look at it as a group, so that people into a rehab, they come out, they might do all right, they might have a relapse, and they might be somewhere else because we deal with a itinerant group of people, and they might want to come back to another Aboriginal rehab. Well, it's not exactly the same. They know that all the cultural safeties and protocols will be there. They just know that because that's what they trust in. They put a lot of trust in us fellas. So we need to reciprocate that trust. We need to endeavour to give them the best possible outcome we possibly can for each individual person and their families and their communities, because that's where the impact is. When we first go back to Coffs Harbour, you may go back up into maybe a Murray from Queensland, might go back up there. And the impact then is on that community, positive other than negative. Now that's the way we look at things. Although we deal with the individual, it's the impact that that person has on the community that we also are aware of as well. And we need to make sure that we're giving the person that walks in the gate the best possible service that we can, which is the fundamental idea of why we got together in the beginning, to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think we had some IT difficulties.
So I'm not the only one that has IT difficulty.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah. No, there is a little bit of IT problems happening. So you've kind of touched on the model of care, and you've talked about how cultural centre to the model of care. Can you tell me a bit more about it, like when it's going to be released? I know we were talking about this earlier. Is planning on doing a launch?
Yeah, I believe we plan to launch it at the NADA conference. It's been a living document for a while. But we believe, we're in that position now to launch it, and that's as a group, ADARRN, it's planned to release it there and moving forward from that. And as Norm did mention as well, we are working on a training package, which working in resi rehab is a little bit different than being an outreach drug and alcohol worker. Actually, it's probably more demanding, because it's not like you can, an outreach worker can go and have a session with half an hour with, or even 15 minutes with the client. We're with the clients 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that, it takes a lot, because you're not only with one client, as Norm mentioned, most of our services take up to 18 plus, and you deal with all these different individuals, and they're all at different levels. Their emotions are at different levels. And in the recovery, they're at different levels. So it can be complex, but also with saying that, we might be labelled as drug and alcohol resi rehab, but we don't only deal with drug and alcohol issues. We take a holistic approach. We deal with whatever needs they request. And that's probably the unique part of having a highly skilled workforce, being able to adapt and tap into those external services to achieve their positive outcomes for the clients. Working in the resi rehab is not actually what some people may believe it is. It's a much more complex, complicated system, but a very rewarding one as well.
I want to thank you both for talking to me today. I just wanted to ask you both, do you have any take-home messages or anything you'd like to say to the audience who's watching us today?
I think, I believe, don't be afraid that if you get the opportunity to work in a resi rehab or visit a rehab or volunteer to work in one, I think it would open your eyes up, quite widely. And also, we develop friendships with the clients, they still know, there is a thin line. We are workers and we have things we have to do, but they're clients. But there's a bond that we develop with them, that's unique. And I think that bond is, what comes with that bond is respect. And a different kind of friendship, and trust. That's one of the big ingredients is trust. And once they trust you, then they become reliant on you, like to help them through that journey, which is totally different, and working. I think I've worked in outreach position before, with people with mental health and also include substance use, but it's a totally different area, totally different environment, and it's a different different approach as well, and in some of these relationships, I've been here in some of these relationships. I still run into guys that come through the centre, even 7 years down the track, and they'll never ever forget who you are and what you've done for them, and they really do appreciate it. And probably one of the highlights, probably one of many, is when you get the call from their wife or their mother saying, "Thank you for giving my husband back," or "Thank you for giving my son back to me." There's some of the highlights.
Yeah, that's pretty special.
Yeah, right. I think that what I'd like in all my time of working in this industry is that Aboriginal control, in my opinion, I think the research is showing that, although governments don't seem to take much notice of it, that's my opinion either, they don't take much notice of, is that that's what needs to happen. If we're going to even start using words like self-determination, like I mentioned at the beginning, that's how it needs to happen. And that's not saying that non-Aboriginal organisations can't do anything, but I think from my experience and from some of the research I've seen that Aboriginal community control needs to happen. That needs to be the way to go, and more money needs to be put into it. And also, I think too that if a non-Aboriginal organisation is trying or wants to help, or whatever the right word is there, Aboriginal people, they need to have Aboriginal workers.
Yep.
And that, to me, is a given. That's just what has to happen. There needs to be more Aboriginal workers in the mainstream workforce. And then you create another problem where you might only have one Aboriginal worker in a workforce of, 15 or 20, and they tend to burn out very, very quickly. There needs to be some supports put in place for those workers. It's that whole thing, even out in the regional communities, like I said before, we need those traineeships. I know they were there a long time. I don't know what happened. To me, they were the way to go. We need those traineeships back. We need all that knowledge in those small communities so that the communities can start to heal themselves. Now, we've got all this talk about self-determination, closing the gap, and that's the way to get those things happening, is to keep the knowledge and the experience, using all the cultural knowledge and experience, and then bring in that other knowledge and let the Aboriginal people adapt it. It's no good governments going, here, just do this, because they're not looking at it from the same viewpoint. It needs to be coming from the Aboriginal people. That's what I've seen work. I mean, I've seen very simple things work in places like Brewarrina, Walgett, Burke, here in Cowra. I've seen those relationships between worker and resident. They're the things. That's what works. Not having, and it's got to be continuous. It's got to be continuous. You can't have drop in one day and then I'll see you again in a month's time. It's that continuity. That's what Aboriginal people expect. That's what they want. They want to deal with the same person predominantly most of the time. They don't want Norm to be here one day and Al's here the next and somebody else the week after. It just doesn't. I don't think it works with anybody, but in particular it doesn't work in Aboriginal communities. Yeah, it's like Al said, if more people just came and had a look. If you rock up to a rehab, you're working for a service, you rock up to a rehab, we're not going to chase you out with a big stick. We're going to say to you, come and have a look. This is what we do. This is how it works. This is what needs to happen. So, yeah, I better stop now, Rach, otherwise I won't stop because I'll just keep yarning. Thank you.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. It's about us taking control of our future. As you said, self-determination. I'd like to give you a big thank you for joining me today. I love hearing you talk about what you do. So thank you. Hi everybody. Thank you for. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, now I just want to say thank you all for joining us today. I want to say happy NAIDOC week. I hope is what still able to come together with COVID going on at the moment. I hope you still were able to come together, hold smaller events in the community or doing an activity. Because this week is a week where we do come together with our families and communities and celebrate our culture and with the broader community. I also think it's important. It's also a week for us as Aboriginal people that we stop and reflect and acknowledge our strengths and resilience as Aboriginal people. I also wanted to notice we had IT problems throughout the webinar, so I think we need better IT systems out in our regional rural communities. So I'm going to go to our chat box. We've got some comments from Mel. The cultural rehabs, the cultural healing centres are needed for our mob, which I totally agree. Worked on a project far west New South Wales in Broken Hill, Kenya, identifying AOD gaps within these communities and visiting mob in Broken Hill Jail. The project was funded by NADA. I work for CRC, Community Restorative Centre, which is an organisation that works with people involved in the justice system throughout post-release and integrating them back into the community. So I fully agree. We definitely need more cultural rehabs. And Norm, this is probably something you can speak on. She's mentioned the Dubbo. The funding is going to Dubbo for rehab, crew rehab in Dubbo.
Yeah, can you hear me, Rach?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I've heard that too, and I've got the notifications about it, but I don't think it's going to be a specific Aboriginal rehab.
Okay.
It's not. It's from what I've heard, it's going to be a mainstream one. They're putting out tenders, apparently open tenders. I believe it should have been an Aboriginal rehab, because I'm pretty sure that the residents in there, 90 to 95% of them will most probably be Aboriginal, especially from that area. I've spent a lot of time out there, and a lot of the residents in Weejelly and Arana Haven come from the Dubbo Wellington area. So yeah, it's much needed. I'm not complaining about it, but I think though there needs to be a lot of work go into setting it up. It needs to be set up properly. There needs to be cultural input go into it as well. The organisations in that area, the Aboriginal organisations, need to be asked and consulted about how things need to work. I mean, no one has come near ADARRN from that area and said, "Yous are all resi rehab CEOs and managers. What do you think's the best way, given that most of the residents will be Aboriginal?" So I'm just waiting, hopefully, that we'll be asked, because there needs to be a lot of cultural input.
Thank you too, Lara. We've got another comment from Lara. Thank you too. Thank you for joining us today, Lara. Do we have any more questions or comments or? I've got a question, Norm, I wanted to ask. Can you tell us about the next steps in the implementation of the model of care? I know you're launching it next year.
Yeah, we're launching it at the NADA conference, and also we've worked up a training package with some videos and stuff like that we're going to trial just in the resi rehabs to see how that goes. It's all based on the model of care, and we'll iron out all the little humps and bumps when we put it to the Resi Rehab staff, and then we'll go a bit wider with it. Everything, we're still in our infancy, and we've got a website, and it's still very basic at the moment, but we're hoping to get professional videos put up on there and have a lot more about the individual Resi Rehabs and the model of care and just what we see as a way to go forward. We're hoping to have a bit more advocacy in the Aboriginal Resi Rehab space and also just in the whole healing processes out in these small Aboriginal communities, obviously in relation to alcohol and drugs. So yeah, we're hoping that we can make some impact out in these communities. And of course the Glen's got the women's rehab starting up there, going through all the processes. Arana Haven's looking at setting up a women's rehab out around Brewarrina. So there are things in the pipeline. We're just hoping that the government will get on board and support the things that we're coming up with, because there's a lot of expertise. We've got a lot of expertise in amongst all the Aboriginal Resi Rehabs in New South Wales. So, you know, hopefully someone will listen to us.
Yes, you touched on services for women, which is very needed, especially for women and our Aboriginal women with children.
Yeah, well, Jelly has women. At the moment, we've got about 8 women in Wee Jelly at the moment, and 90% of those women have got kids in care. So there's a whole another area that needs to be looked at there. We just haven't got the funding. Yeah. Our core funding doesn't cover all that sort of stuff. We try we facilitate visits, and there's a big problem with transport. We do the Zoom stuff with families, but yeah, there needs to be a whole lot more talk around women with children in care and what we're going to do moving forward, how we're going to facilitate getting Aboriginal families back together again.
Yes. So it'd be really good if people are really interested in the launch of the model of care to join us at our NADA conference next year. Okay, I've got a couple more comments. Brogan, thank you. And also to Kim, thank you, who's joining us from Elora Women's and Children's Rehab in Orange today. Mostly before moving on, does anyone else have any comments or questions? Okay. I think that's it, Norm. I want to say a big special thank you to you. Thank you.
No, thanks for the opportunity, and thanks to everybody that took interest in watching the webinar too.
Yes, I agree.
We're very passionate about doing something for people with drug and alcohol problems.
Yeah. Okay, thank you everyone. I'm going to end the webinar now. If you have any further questions or comments, you can contact me at NADA, or you can contact Norm. But if you don't know Norm's details, please just reach out to me at NADA, and I will definitely forward on to Norm your details. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Rach. Thanks, everybody.